Like, oh, because you like abuse children to keep people safe, I'm going to revoke your right to vote. Like, I don't get it.
Well, what if the policy has to deal with, let's say, for instance, the decriminalization. Actually, let's go back to the one that you just provided as like an example of like safety of the people when it comes to creating a list. What if the public starts starting to direct themselves, and there's a large part of this population. Sorry, not a large part. There's a portion of this population who have committed this kind of like egregious crime that do
Yeah.
decide to vote in favor of getting rid of that list.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing of like politics, right? Is that like you can say that like there's a group of people that are like talking about dangerous like legislation. Like right wingers might look at that like left wing, like on left wingers, right? They might want to revoke their rights to vote because they're voting so dangerous things for people that like they need to be revoked of that right. But like I don't really like it just kind of irks me in the wrong way, like revoking people's right to vote in a way. I think there's like a principle to be upheld here.
Sure.
Enkar, what if I told you that we in America passed legislation, hypothetically, that felons aren't allowed to advocate for politics? How would you feel about that?
Because that'd be criminalization of thought.
Well, it's freedom of speech, right? We're taking that right away from them, right?
Correct. I don't know if I'd be actually for that.
How different is it that I, as a felon, am able to advocate for dangerous ideology, but I'm not able to go vote for it personally? Is that any different?
I would say that there's a difference here, yes.
What about the 4 to 10% of felons that are actually innocent? It's estimated that between 4 to 10% of felon criminals currently in prison are innocent. What about them? Should they be allowed to vote?
Oh, of course. Once it's been proven.
No. As in, like, it hasn't been
Or
proven.
falsely
But the
convicted.
estimate is that 4 to 10% of people who are like were
No, I already got
like,
what you're just repeating
guilty,
yourself, and of course
right,
you
were
would
actually
say,
innocent.
well, how would you wait? How do you get to the actual prescription of estimating that it's 4 to 10% without actually having already previous cases that have been proven to show that they were innocent?
That's what the Michigan National Registry of Exonerations.
Yeah, because they're basing it off of like previous information.
They're basing it off of amount of exonerations and
Correct.
like amount of rates that were previously guilty, which are now proven innocent over.
Correct.
Like,
That's what I just said.
yeah. So based on those statistics, between 4 to 10% of current felons serving sentences are innocent, right? And
yeah, and to fast forward, you would say yes, they should be given back their ability to vote.
No, but
because they're innocent.
What I guess what I'm saying
sounds
is
like a no-brainer.
Yeah, but even like here's the thing though, right? That's the number that aren't later exonerated. That's the estimated number that aren't ever exonerated. It's like you can't really tell, right, which ones were actually innocent and which ones were actually felons, right? So I think because you can't tell, you just have to say, okay, just let them all vote is probably the best idea.
Do you think the felons care about their right to vote?
Some of them.
Their own right to vote,
Yeah, maybe.
probably.
Didn't seem like they cared enough when they did the crime.
Maybe they didn't
stop.
like when they did the crime, but then like maybe 10 years later they're a different
Yeah,
person.
let's
Then
ask
we
infinite
run into
diversity.
a tricky situation though, where you're saying that consent to an action is consent to the consequences of that action, right? Which is which falls apart very quickly in lots of situations, right? Like a very common, it's commonly used in like abortion debates, right? Where you basically say just because someone is consenting to sex doesn't mean that they consent to be pregnant, right? Consenting to an action isn't consenting to the consequences of the action.
Wait, then wouldn't you also apply this when it comes to somebody being served a a charge against them. Like you
Yeah,
can't,
they're not
you
consenting
can't,
to
you
being
can't
arrested,
somehow
but
come out here
they
being
will
like,
be
well,
arrested.
I didn't know that this law existed, thus you can't charge me for the thing that I didn't know existed.
We
You
can
can
charge them at
actually.
different degrees,
That's
right?
actually
Like
a
the level
defense
of
you
it.
can use.
Yeah,
Like you
level of
can use
intention,
that
right?
defense to
I
get a
don't think you
lower.
can use this. I'm sorry.
You can. You can
I think
say
you're,
that
I think
you
you're
didn't know a
bullshitting
law
me.
No.
existed, and you will
Yeah,
get
Ignorance of a
arrested.
crime?
Yeah,
Yeah.
ignorance of a crime is not defense of a crime. But what you can do is you can go to show motivation.
No,
of
wait 1
individuals.
second, Young. I want Jade, if you could provide me a defense of that statement, put it inside chat. I'll check it out.
Again, though, like the motivation, like intentionality of an individual goes to show the level of crime that you can charge them with, right?
Say that one more time. I feel like I didn't
Like
fully understand
first degree
it.
versus second degree versus third degree, right?
Yeah. What about it?
So, like, if I don't really want to murder you, but I do it in a heat of moment, that's second degree, versus if I plan and intentionally think about all the consequences and repercussions of these actions as first degree, we charge these people differently, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Like,
we
if I would,
call it
if
a
I would
lack
try
of.
to, if I was
We
trying to
call it a
steal,
lack of fault element. It only
Be-
applies to certain laws where essentially the prosecution must prove that the defendant had a specific level of knowledge or fault in order to be found guilty of a particular law.
Did you put it inside chat?
It's not. It doesn't apply to like all laws, and it's limited, but it applies to any laws in which some level of intent or understanding is required. The link is. Let me just get it for you.
This sounds like a passion crime thing.
Like it
Or a car. It sounds like a car
it's not,
accident.
it's not saying that like a mistake of like it's not saying that ignorance of legislation is an excuse for the offense. It's saying that there are two provisions which exist which can defeat criminal responsibility in circumstances.
Yeah, but that just goes back to what I said. It's like ignorant in and of itself is not what's defensible. There are other actions that are being employed that obscures your judgment.
Yeah, you're right. Just not knowing a law isn't enough. It has to be that the not knowing a law meant that the interpretation of said law in this circumstance changed.
All right, so
whether it
now
was
that we
an
know that,
intent
we can
or
move
real-
beyond that.
Yeah.
So just remember that what's at the very beginning of this, I did state that everyone should be allowed the opportunity to be given back the ability to vote. There's no point where it's unanimously always taken away from you. However, there should be an avenue, or at least I would advocate that there should be an avenue that would allow that if a felon or what deems based on the state in terms of like the type of the crime, when they present their request to actually have their situation reviewed, to be given said privileges back, which would extend to those rights. I would like them to actually look at it rather than take as long as they do because of whatever random reason.
Okay.
so like
to
now,
provide some sort of
if I
response.
would try to steal, man, like that argument, like if I'm trying to convince myself of it, it's like, let's say you have a group of people and you're playing a board game, right? But then the function of the board game is that everybody can vote for rules in the board game, right? But then like everybody's voting for the rules in the board game, but then there's this one person that like is breaking all the rules that everybody like agreed to. But then like it would be easy to argue that like that person should not be able to vote for rules in the board game if they're gonna break them anyway.
I mean, they're just if they're voting for the
Wait,
rules, you just don't vote
to keep
with
in the
them.
hypothetical, within the rule making itself, they would still be
Mhm.
proving to the people that are making the rules to be like, hey, you've seen within the time that I've been working in this board game, I've been following all the rules and I've been doing even some good things to actually keep the board game moving. I'm a friend. We're working things out. Would you allow me back in so that I can actually vote on the rules? And I would be fine with them being able to decide, well, you within the sufficient time and the actions that you've committed, yes, you can vote on the rules.
I feel like that
Yeah.
creates a bubble, though. No, like imagine if, for example,
Yeah.
in some crazy world, right, the Trump administration says, okay, if you're left wing, you can't vote anymore, right? It basically just restricts all future like it basically locks.
Wait, would you be against the
entire
German way of
population
doing it, just to make
into
sure that
being
I'm following you?
Yes.
So you would be against them completely banning the fascist party that was being recreated back in, I think it was 1948, 1949, and the Communist Party that was being created over in the, I think it was not long after that, close to like the 1950s.
I think that the issue there lies in like a lack of enforcement of balance of powers, not necessarily.
No, I'm just asking for a yes or no. Would you be for or against their policy of banning fascists, the fascist party?
I'd be against it because I think it's
Why?
too.
Because now we're getting to the point of like,
Yeah,
all right,
I think
you're in the
I think we're
camp of
entering-
getting rid of rights, so why this seems to be the case?
No, I as in like I would want them to still have the right to vote because otherwise we're entering into like the masked man fallacy area. Right?
Well, you just criminalize thought.
Are you familiar with the masked man fallacy?
Wait, I'm sorry. Is it not a crime to try and create the fascist party?
No, I'm saying that they should still be allowed to vote. If there's a fascist, right, and the fascist wants to vote, right?
Why?
I think they should still be allowed to.
You want to vote to have the fascists represent you, and to create the fascist party. That would be what's being done here. What you just did is you tried to filter out that vote.
No, I think that just because you vote for something doesn't mean it should overturn pre-existing laws and like guardrails.
You just overturned it.
Yeah, like again, if you vote for like, if I vote that like murder should be like uncriminalized, right? I think that yes, that should be overturned regardless of like who's voting for it. But they should still have the.
No, I'm trying to get you to recognize that when you're saying I still think that they should have the right to vote, you don't actually believe that because you don't want them to have the right to vote to create the fascist party.
No. What I'm saying is they can vote, right? And yes, we can delegitimize it, but it means that in the future, if they want to change their mind and vote for something that isn't against the guardrails and guidelines that exist, they still have the ability to do that, right? We're not locking them into doing that, right? It's just this current vote.
Wait, then you're falling in the same hoop of what I just described when it came to like if you're doing the crime, you obviously didn't care about the fact that you were given the right to vote, the privilege to vote.
That's incorrect because again, if you do a crime, right, you're not consenting to saying, "Hey, all of the consequences of like the I'm consenting to all of this." Like if I commit a crime and I'm charged with a death sentence, I didn't consent to being killed.
I don't see how this doesn't apply when it comes to the criminalization of the fascist party.
Because it's very different because you're not taking away someone's rights. No one's rights are being removed, right?
How is that not a right?
Their right to vote still exists. That specific vote they did, like I have a right to eat food, right?
How is somebody's vote to create the fascist party and to have somebody represent them as a fascist not a part of being the ability to right to vote?
Because they don't have the right to vote in a fascist party. They just have the right to vote.
For a fascist.
It's like saying
you just took that away from them.
Eat, but you don't have a right to eat other people. Like adding more specificity doesn't necessarily undermine the original point. Just because just because they're not allowed to vote for a fascist party doesn't mean they shouldn't have the right to vote at all. They're very different things, right? Just because you shouldn't be allowed to eat
if you believe
who are living
in the principle of the right to vote, then this would be included. But if you don't, and you're filtering it in order to say that certain things are not a right in which you're allowed to vote, but other things are something that is included for the right to vote, then yes, you are undermining it.
This is a false dichotomy. There's not two categories where like you believe that everyone should be allowed to vote for whatever and whatever they vote for should 100% go through, or you believe in restricting votes, like the right to vote for certain people.
How is this a false dichotomy? Explain that.
They aren't the only two groups. There's a third group wherein you should think everyone should be allowed to vote, but there should be guardrails about what ends up being passed.
Wait, then this would still follow the criminal situation. They are allowed to vote. They just got to follow. They just had to fall within the particular guardrails in order to get that ability to vote.
No, it's again.
The allowance is still there.
If there's someone who's a felon and they want to vote that murder should be like legitimized and like decriminalized, then yes, we can delegitimize that vote. But if they want to vote for something else, they should have that. I feel like you're stuck on like this.
Sure.
this false dichotomy where everyone should either be able to vote on
Well-
anything they want or like not be able to vote on anything.
Well, let's follow this, okay? This fascist decides that they want to create the fascist party. You said, well,
Yes.
you can't. You're not allowed to actually vote to create the fascist party.
No,
they
you
do
can
it.
vote to
They
create it,
do
but
it
it's-
anyways. What now?
What do you mean they just? I'm saying you can vote to create the fascist party, but there should be guardrails in place to prevent that vote from actually.
And what does that prevention
coming to
look like?
fruition. Like courts and independent regulators.
That
and
does what to the people?
balance of power.
That
do
does
you mean
what
it does
to the
what?
people? This fascist who
prevents
creates this
laws from being
fascist
passed
party,
again.
we're voting to create these members in said government. They
Mhm.
continue to do so. They are pushing to make this happen. They have
Yeah, again.
already gone through the process.
If they get a majority, right? If the fascist movement gets a majority, they should still be blocked from coming.
Wait, why are we
into
going
power,
off of
right?
majority now?
Okay, if they don't get a majority, it doesn't matter at all. Like the vote doesn't matter. Who cares?
Well, I just need to make sure that we're understanding that we're not talking about majority in terms of like the overall. We're just talking about within their constituency, correct?
Okay, if they get if they don't get, again, if you get like a member in their parliament, right, who is like super hyper fascist, right, and they do things that like break laws, right, or like disrupt the balance of power, then yes, they should just be removed from office.
They should be removed. And how would you remove them?
Say, hey, don't show up next time. Like how do you fire someone from a
They're
job,
still going to
right?
want to do the party.
Okay, they can continue to want to do the party, right? But they're not going to be allowed in parliament because they break the law.
Oh, hey, wait. They're not going to be allowed. What does that mean when they aren't allowed? What is the disincentivizing structure that
Well, if
makes
they
it to
try
where
to
they
walk in-
enforce them
Yeah,
not being
okay.
allowed?
If they try to walk in, then they'll be trespassed, and if they continue, then they'll be arrested.
Oh, so you are
Yeah.
criminalizing it. So you are effectively getting rid of them being able to vote for who they want to actually represent them.
No, the right to vote still exists, but the right to vote does not.
You got
imply
rid
the
of their
to
right. They
break
still
the
want this
law.
fascist.
Again, here's the thing though: they have the right to vote for that fascist, but doesn't mean that that fascist then has the right to break the law just because they got voted into parliament. Like if I vote Donald Trump to be president and he murders someone, right? Doesn't mean that he's immune to like that, like because I voted for him. Like it's the dumbest argument ever.
Well, yes, it does in America, right?
Like just because I voted for someone doesn't mean that they can just like go break the law and do whatever the fuck they want. And like
Well,
if I voted
we're
for
going
Donald
back
Trump
to the breaking the
rock
law
up
and
just
what does the enforcement mechanism look like and how do you
Arresting them, putting them in jail.
disincentivize? You are
arrest them,
effectively
put them in jail.
creating the same system in which you're criticizing this system that's already provided now.
No, you're not, because you're not arresting the person who's voting. You're arresting the person who's breaking the law.
Wait, how would you get them? Wait, you just tried to do a trespass, and you also made it to
Yes.
where you're not allowed to actually have any representation for that particular party or person who is trying to be represented as a fascist.
No, they can. They can continue to vote for other people that don't break the law. And I mean, until they break the law, right? We're not going to retroactively stop people from voting for
Well,
someone.
I already told you
before
that they're
they
breaking the
vote.
law. 'Cause retroactively, the law has been passed. Trying to get rid of this particular party that currently exists.
Yes. Okay. Cool. Has again, and they can introduce laws to like restrict that party. I don't think those laws should be passed because you essentially like.
Well, this wouldn't be restriction anymore. Restriction just means that you're just confining, but they still exist. This is literally getting rid of. You criminalized it. It no longer exists. They don't have the same rights or privileges that the other parties have.
They do. They have the
Where?
exact same rights the other parties do. In fact, if the other parties wanted to do the
They're
same
not. You
thing
just
that they're doing,
trespassed
they
them.
wouldn't be
They
able to
can't
do
be
it.
on the same property.
Yes, but here's the thing though. If anyone from any of the other parties had done the same thing that they did, they would also be arrested and trespassed. It's not like double standards if it applies to literally everyone.
This is incredibly a double standard. If one party
How's
can
it a
do
double standard?
if
If
one
it-
party
if-
can do
if-
a thing but the other one cannot, this is a double standard.
No, but I'm not saying that's the case though. Both parties can't do it. If I want to like implement a fascist regime, regardless of which party I'm a part of, it's illegal.
And the fascist regime is supposed to be what? A sentimentality of thought that has a particular set of policies and ideas in which you find to be threatening,
I would
correct?
say No, I'd say specifically it's just like policies which bring direct harm to people. Like
Okay,
don't
there we
kill
go.
people, for
Policies that we
example.
could find to be directly harmful.
Yes.
So we're referring back to like the idea of like a policy that could be directly harmful because of the individuals in which they have like these ideas or thoughts and actions they commit.
No.
Yes. However,
But-
how else would you be able to determine when a particular party is being damaging or not?
Yeah, okay, so it's very simple. If you try to pass a law that is directly harmful, you've broken the law. If you don't try to pass a law that's directly harmful, you haven't broken the law. You can vote for someone, they can rock up to parliament, they can
That's
do it,
not
and
how
then
they
up
determine this,
until they
Jade.
break the law. It's how I'm saying that it should. I'm not saying it's how
Oh.
they do it.
Okay. So then the party does get to the majority, in which case you've already failed.
No, again, if even
Well, they
if
can't
it's a
pass
maj-
any of the policies, especially in Parliament,
even if it's
unless they get a majority in order
party,
to get the policies through.
again, even if it's a majority party, it should still be blocked. If they're trying to institute policies which are like kill Jewish people, yes, it should be blocked. I feel like it's a no-brainer.
But they actually haven't been able to actually showcase the harm, though. It's just a projection of what possible harm could be committed.
In what universe is killing Jewish people not harmful? What?
No. This is you're creating a false dichotomy there. There's a distinction here between a projection of possible harm versus actual harm of what's already transpired. One's measured,
Okay.
one is not.
And once again, thinking about killing Jewish people, whatever, right? Actually acting on it, that's the criminal part, right? Actually, like having plans.
Hence why I
to do
told
it,
you that
okay.
nothing happens because they don't have the majority. But once they get the majority, they could pass the policies that do the direct harm.
No, but here's the thing, though. That's what I'm saying. Is the actual passing of the policies the action? That's what should be blocked.
Yeah, but if
Not
they
the
already have the
thinking about it.
capability of committing the policy, then there's no way for you to get them to be criminalized.
That's what
You'd
I
have to
mean.
wait.
Have independent regulators and have guardrails in place. So even if there is a majority
Oh,
party
okay.
that wants to
So we
pass something that is
checks and
like,
balances.
incredibly, yeah, it's like have courts, right? Like they have in America, and they have this in Germany as well, where trying
And
to pass
what
a law that
happens
took
if
away
they
someone's
decide to pack
rights.
those and say that these particular people are now going to be beholden to us
Again,
because they're part of our party?
this is just a whataboutism, and you're moving the goalpost, right?
No, it's
You
not a
could say,
whataboutism
okay,
because
what if
this
like every
apparently it
single
happens.
Okay, but what if again and again? There's not really much you can do about that, right? If you have like 99% of the population wants to kill Jewish people, and they all just start running on the streets doing it, like,
Yeah.
What do you want? Like, and you're saying, okay, what should we do then? Well,
Of course, because we're running into a situation of like you're already we're already breaking the walls where you're getting to a point of admitting that yes, we are going to restrict particular rights that are provided or privileges.
no, we're not restricting the right to vote, though. We're restricting the.
You did say you literally said that we were restricting. It's just that we're not getting rid of it.
True. I'm saying that. Okay, I'm saying that we're restricting the rights of the people voted into parliament, not the people voting them in.
Mhm.
So the person in parliament isn't allowed to vote on like a bill which is extremely harmful, but the person who's voting them in is allowed to vote in that person, right? Because the right to vote is guaranteed, but the right to vote on something that is incredibly harmful is a separate right? Just be.
Do you think the
you have a
people
general right, and then you have a specific exception to that right?
right, so to kind of follow the line of logic of like the thing in which it actually creates harm for society, do you think that an individual can create harm for society enough to where you take that away, doing the same thing you just did to the party?
No, I'm not saying that there. I don't think that any action, right, is
Well, could it not be measured?
Yeah, and I don't think that any action could, like for example, the harm of an action, is existent like inherently to that action, right? So the harmful actions are restricted. An action doesn't suddenly become harmful in a certain circumstance, right? The context around that action and the action being taken were already harmful and what should already be criminalized.
Because they're now committing harm to society. Yes.
No, but that action should have always be criminalized because that action doesn't suddenly become harmful. The action was always harmful, just no one was doing it.
So you don't think that them committing the actual crime they somehow wouldn't have inherent ideas when it comes to the particular crimes that they're doing that would be harmful to society?
Sorry, can you repeat that? I tuned out.
Them committing the crime, they wouldn't have inherent ideas that was attached to the crime in which they did that wouldn't be harmful to society. You don't think that actually exists?
It does exist. It's called a second-degree crime.
Okay, so if this is something that we know is measured based off of like what you've already described when it comes to like, for instance, policy making, then it sounds to me that you would agree that there would actually be restrictions to the extent in which you would take it away.
No. You shouldn't. You shouldn't take away the right to vote. You should just restrict the
Okay, fine.
actions
I'll
that
be
leads to.
I'll be a bit more specific here, okay? When I meant takeaway, I'm saying temporarily because you could get it reinstated. You just got to prove that you're no longer harmful, that your ideas have shifted, that you're
I
no
can
longer going to commit
somewhat
crimes
understand that point more so.
of the particular
And
egregious action.
I'd actually say that anyone who's released from jail should probably have the reinstated. The reason we release felons from jail at all is because we're basically saying, hey, you've served your time, right? We're going to, you are able to become a productive citizen. We're basically saying that you were previously unsafe, but now we're hoping that you are safe. So we're giving you those rights back.
Wait, so
right?
are you agreeing with me or disagreeing with me then? What just happened?
I'm saying that if you have a felon who's in jail, I could understand restricting their right to vote while they're serving their sentence, but after their sentence is concluded and they're introduced back into society, right, where we're trusting them again to not commit that action, right, that they should be reinstituted with that right to vote.
I think this is more of a tier system. When we're which is why when it came to like, for instance, the example of like the baby rapist, you had the one guy who was saying that we should still keep him on a list. Do you disagree with that?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
The hypothetical of the baby rapist, we should still keep him on a list. It was an example that was given. Do you agree with that type of policy?
Well, I'm confused at the point you're trying to make. Could you say it in a different way?
The hypothetical was about a baby rapist, all right, and whether or not you should like restrict or take away particular rights and privileges. And one guy gave an example of a policy in which to actually restrict and a sort of right, a privilege of privacy here of them being put onto a list. Would you accept that? Because they've already done their time in jail or prison, whatever. Mm-hmm. Now they're out in the public, but they would keep them on a list.
Yeah, but do you know why we keep that list?
I already know why. Would you accept the policy or not?
To keep a list?
Yes, of the baby rapist.
Yes.
Okay, so there does seem to be a tier system here of like, even when we put particular criminals in society, we're like, all right, we got to the point where we accept that you can be put back into the public system, but we're not entirely sure yet if you're still going to be able to be normal within said public system. So we're going to keep a watchful eye.
That's why we have stuff like parole.
Yeah. So it sounds to me, not even just parole,
and again,
in general, society does this.
But here's the thing, though. I can actually understand to an extent, like, to me, right, my position is less so restricting it in those circumstances. I could get behind that, or I could not get behind it, right? My position is more so that you shouldn't forever restrict all felons, right, regardless of tier, from the right to vote. I think that I am not opposed to there being a tier system. I just think that there shouldn't be like a permanent restriction.
Okay.
That's my position. It's not that like there shouldn't be some cases.
Just remember like what I started with. At the beginning I said that there is an argument for when it comes to the crime. So there more than likely is a crime that you could give me where I'd be like, I don't think that's harmful enough. This is taken into a calculus of like the degree of harm that's being created of what's already been discussed here in this conversation between you and I. So I would already agree with you on that sentiment that not all felonies are going to be deemed in the same level, but there are some.
I can understand that. Again, like it kind of irks me the wrong way because I think that to me, I think it's a slippery slope. Not I would agree. Fallacy, but
a good, pretty much
where-
almost all of these are going to be slippery slopes because at some point you're going to have to like,
yeah,
you're not going to go Puritan in one way or the other. The extremes that was mentioned before about like it's either a yes or a no. You are going to give way one way or the other.
you're making you're making you're putting some level of trust into like not only the judicial system but like the
Guardrails,
lawmakers that
yes.
put that judicial system in place, right? And the judicial system isn't infallible, right?
Correct.
Just
Which
like
is why
no
we talked
one's
about
infallible.
guardrails, checks and balances.
Yeah, and I think that there should always be paths, and where regardless of what crime you committed and how heinous it was, there should be a path to rehabilitation where you're
Don't
able
disagree.
to provide, where you're able to essentially like, again, even in like severe cases, right? I don't think it's to the benefit of anyone to essentially treat felons as second-class citizens in every situation.
No, you
forever.
we're backtracking
no,
because you don't believe
every
that.
situation ever. Like, I think there should always be a pathway where they can go from becoming second-rate citizens to becoming like.
Oh, okay, then
fully-
yes, we agree. There we go.
Yeah.
So would you say like a case example would be somebody like Jimmy Trejo, I think is his name, the actor who used to be like a hardcore inmate who was like Charles Manson's bodyguard and shit, and he became like the hero of his community. There's like murals of him on every building in his hometown. They used to hate him, and now they like they hold him up as like their greatest hero. That's an example, right?
Yeah, I think you're depriving society of something when you're essentially condemning people to like it's not in the best interests of society, and it doesn't lead to the best outcomes to have no level to like no path to redemption. It doesn't lead it.
Yeah.
All it does is like perpetuate a cycle of like revenge and like an eye for an eye and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Retributive justice isn't justice, it's just retribution.
Yeah, exactly. And it can like be a very divisive topic for some people because it's like some people can do horrific crimes, right? And just because someone committed a horrific crime doesn't mean that like it's in the best interests of everyone to essentially like say, okay, you're now like forever criminal.
It's funny too, because when people think that this derives from the Bible and like eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, what they don't know is the context, which is that that was a moral improvement over the alternative at the time. The alternative at the time was that if you hurt my son, I'll kill your whole family, right? So blood reprisals, the idea of blood reprisals was relatively like a reform at the time, which was instead of killing someone's entire family and their tribe and their neighbors just because they made you mad, now you're restricted to just killing their son in return for your son. So a son for a son, an eye for an eye, was a way of limiting the collateral damage when people had hurt feelings, right? And
that makes sense. I
that
didn't know
doesn't mean
but
it
that's
doesn't mean it's the last word on morality. It means that it was a slight improvement over the depraved honor killings that they used to do, right?
that makes sense. I didn't know that.
So
Thanks for sharing.
yeah, we can give it credit as like a moral reform at the time it was said. But the idea that this is God's perfect law for all time and like the most perfect moral code is batshit insane, right? And it's obvious that Christians don't practice it anymore because if they did, like we wouldn't have any of the legal codes that we do now. The reason for that is the legal codes we have now are based on the laws of Athens, which is actually where the Deuteronomy and the whole Old Testament actually got its moral legal code is from Athens, not from the original Hebrew laws that they did or didn't enforce.
Controversial take. Bring back duels.
Like James Burr.
I'm just saying, right? It would get rid of like the very aggressive types, possibly. To the extent of like, hey, if you really find yourself to be that egotistical about your status, I would probably find that you don't care about your fellow man, just yourself.
You think just let them take each other out?
They feel inclined and they really want to, yeah. So long as they're just not being forced. only reason why we outlawed that was because we were afraid politicians were going to kill themselves and we would lose out on our representative.
I think that was part of it.
I do have to head off. Good talking to you, Jane.
Oh yeah,
Appreciate
nice
it.
chat. Best of luck.
You too.